CM Sportsnet presents Sports Talk at Island Green.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Sports Talk. Coach of the McDaniel Green Terror football program, Skylar Fultz. Skylar, we have much better weather here this afternoon. We've had some pretty overcast, rainy days the last couple of Mondays, but it's nice finally out here.
I wish I could have got here a little earlier. I would have hit some golf balls waiting for us to get started.
Yeah, gonna maybe get some cornhole tosses in there. Get loosened up for the show today. Well, glad to be back with you once again for another episode of Sports Talk at the Island Green. Unlike last week when we had our episode here, you actually played a game that we can talk about this past weekend. Another Friday night contest on the road for you this past weekend, which was a loss, 20-7 at Gettysburg under the lights. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts from the game.
We had our team meeting earlier today. We were talking with the guys. We were really, really pleased at times during the game, right? There were certain moments where both sides of the ball were playing very, very well. Special teams helped us. A couple of big, major mistakes really hurt us. And then when you go back and you watch the film, some of those big mistakes came from fine details that really hurt us. So when we were talking with the guys, we're like, at times, we look really, really good. And the belief is there, what we've been preaching to them since preseason's there, but it really came down to we have to pay attention and really key in on some of those little details a little bit more. Exactly.
I mean, this was such a close game, and the final score doesn't really indicate that because, when you take away, of course, the two pick sixes in the second half, put the game away for Gettysburg. But when you take a look at the numbers from this past weekend, you had more first downs than the Bullets did. You had more passing yards. You had more total offense. And you had more time of possession as well. So in all four of those offensive categories, you outpaced them. And most of the time, that means you win the game. But those two costly turnovers, as you mentioned, just really swayed the momentum of the game.
Yeah, when you go back in, anytime you look at the box score of a game, there's always a couple of major ones people look at, right? But we go back and we always look. There are a few little ones that tend to get lost. One was we weren't good enough in the red zone. Right, and when you get down there, you have to come away with points, and we weren't able to do that. Second was we had way too many penalties in the game. You can always second-guess penalties when they show up in a football game, but at the end of the day, a penalty is called, it's called. So there's certain things we definitely can do better with that. And then offensively, last one is third down. We were only 5 of 15 on third down. And that ends up really making you have to kind of fight uphill, and you're staying off schedule, and it's kind of putting you in bad situations. We were able to lean on the defense a little bit, though. A couple of times I would have liked to have been a little more aggressive, but defense was playing so well, I wasn't afraid to punt the football, knowing that they were going to be able to get the ball back to us. Yeah. We just let a few things slip away from us at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, the defense was really stellar. It was a 7-6 game at halftime, and then the two pick sixes in the second half, but didn't give up any other offensive scores beyond that. I mean, Malachi Murphy had the best game that he's probably ever played this past weekend. 11 tackles, a tackle and a half for loss as well. He had an interception, too. I mean, he was all over the place defensively. Talk a little bit about his impact and how you think he might have helped galvanize the defense for that contest.
I mean, Malachi now being healthy completely kind of changes things for our defense a little bit because to start the year, he was still rehabbing his injury from last season. So him being completely healthy, being able to completely practice allows us to do some different things on defense because he is a phenomenal player at the safety position. Yeah. When he's able to use his athletic ability, his intelligence, and then he knows when to be aggressive. He's smart. He's a new age safety, right? Where you go back, there are times he could decleat someone, but you can't play football that way anymore. And he puts himself in those positions to then be smart and not get those penalties at the same time. So he's a heck of a football player. I'm glad he's on our side, and I'm glad he's healthy right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he even made an impact in the William Patterson game, the last home game, where he recovered a fumble in the second half. So he's really had a tremendous resurgence this year. Really happy to see him continue to develop and succeed as a leader on the defensive end. Alex Brown and DeMonte Gifford each had a sack as well. So the defense certainly did their job in this previous week, but we need to talk a little bit more about the offense here, and I'll start with the starting quarterbacks. That's been a theme for a lot of my questions here to you over the last couple of weeks, and I'll keep with it. So this past weekend, you made the decision to start Angel Granado at quarterback for this past weekend against Gettysburg. And Eric Grinwis, the senior, had been the starter for most of the season leading up to this past week. What went into the decision to start Angel and keep him in the game throughout the whole way?
So you go back to the William Patterson game, and when Angel came in the second half, he played pretty well. And our thought was we need to be able to run the football a little bit better, and we know what Angel's capable of doing. So when we sat down and we were game planning, we're like, let's continue to kind of grow and build off of what we had done. And then basically utilize him to his skill set, what he's able to do. I think what I was really happy about is you look at a lot of what he was doing throwing the football. He was very efficient early on before we fell behind the sticks in the second half and some things. I mean, the first half, he played very, very well, putting the football. He was moving the chains, third down, a couple of big conversions, and then his touchdown pass. Right. He definitely had a great week of practice leading into it, and then it does help. Like you mentioned, Eric as a senior, Eric was a second coach all week. Eric prepared like he was going to play every snap, but then at the end of the day, Angel was one that was going to go, and he helped him every step of the way, even through the football game. So, again, that's kind of what we knew we had in the quarterback room. It was just a matter of what's going to allow us to play our best and each game plan-wise, and we thought that was going to give us a great chance after the week before. Yeah,
I mean, Angel had a really efficient first half, as you mentioned. He was, I think, 8 of 11 on his completions. So, really solid first half showing. And, we also had to mention, too, that he's such a dynamic threat on the ground as well. He was the leading rusher in the game. He had, 20 rushes for 82 yards on the ground. So super efficient rushing day from him as well. Of course, that he brings that versatility to the table, not just through the air, but on the ground as well. But how impressed were you to see him be the leading rusher for the Green Terror in this past week?
We kind of thought, again, with our game plan going in, that there was some stuff we were going to be able to do with him that were going to put us in a good position to get positive yards. And again, the one thing I hate with NCAA and how they do their score, like he actually had more rushing yards than that, but you take the sacks away. So like the called runs and stuff that Angel was doing, he was very explosive in doing things. A couple of times pass protection broke down. The sack total actually takes away from that. Right. So like when I look at the quarterback running with the football, it's what did he do on called runs? And his actual called runs, whether they were Reed or him keeping the ball himself, were extremely efficient. Yeah. So that was one thing we were really, really happy about moving forward, because that was what we were doing at the end of the William Patterson game, and we kind of took the next step forward with the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, like, he looked really solid on the ground in that William Patterson game and was able to get the offense a couple of scoring chances in the second half, and he keeps that momentum up this week as well, like on the ground, very, very efficient running. And look, if it was up to me, if I was doing the stats, he would have those 92 rushing yards. But of course, the NCAA rules, a sack means you lose rushing yards, so he only ended up with 82. But let's switch a little bit to continuing with the running game, though. Micaiah Cobbs, who had such a great start to the regular season, slow game for him this past week, just 3 carries and 8 yards on the ground for him. What else do you want to do to try and get the rest of the running backs more involved in the offense here moving forward?
It was there. You just have to realize some of the stuff that we were doing in the run game were choice runs. Yeah. So, again, with Angel making the decision that he's keeping the football instead of giving it, right, you're going to have games that are that way. Now, you could have the flip side of it where excuse me, where there are going to be games where Angel might only have 8-9 carries, but now it's going to be spread out a little bit more amongst the running backs. So when you're doing some of the choice runs, the read option stuff, the word that everyone uses, but that it could always end up going that way. Right. It doesn't matter if you're doing that or even in the RPO world of how things go. Right. It's just kind of what the defense dictates. We'd like to see, again, I think Dempster and Wagner both played well the snaps that they played for us at running back as well, because we wanted to be able to spread it out a little bit more and not just kind of put all of it on Cobb so much, because early on in the year that's going to take a toll through the course of the year. And then also those two started practicing really, really well, so we wanted to make sure we had multiple guys that could be able to touch the ball in different areas.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with not just the running of Angel, but also his passes were crisp too. I mean, we've seen a lot of potential from him, not just from this year, but when he was the starter in the back end of last year as well. Made some really tight, crisp throws. You know, you saw Kyle Silver and Grayson Wendell both have 6 catches this past weekend. And the offense was really flowing through the air. Of course, those 2 picks in the second half were the difference maker ultimately. But you saw a lot of potential in the passing game that we really haven't seen up to this point in the season yet.
Yeah, it was the growth that I kind of wanted to see. It was the distribution that I wanted to see, where you can't really kind of key in on one person. And again, it's tough replacing Logan Marsh, who was very dynamic to start the year, but these guys are doing a great job stepping up and allowing us kind of to distribute the football across the field, right? Where we're not just necessarily leaving one person in the same spot, just trying to find them the way the football. We kind of are moving those guys around a good bit to utilize them to their different skill sets. So I think it's a testament to them and their practice, and they're kind of keying into what we're trying to do on offense week in and week out with our game plans.
Yeah, Wesley Nchinda had another great game as well. 3 catches, 44 yards for him. And, you know, you mentioned it, Logan Marsh being out for the rest of the year with a knee injury. That's a big loss, right? Because he's your leading receiver. You know, he's an older player as well. But it doesn't really look like the receiving core has lost a step, even without him in the lineup. Like, you've seen a lot of production from Silver and from Wendell and from Nchinda as well. And that's got to really build Angel's confidence moving forward as well. If he's going to be the starting quarterback for this offense, to have 3 really reliable targets that can make those catches for you, that can get out in space, get yards after the catch as well, can score. Like, you know, how much of it plays into the psyche when you know that you have 3 reliable targets week in and week out that can constantly make those catches for you in any situation?
I mean, that's why you call it a wide receiver core, right? Like, it's the entire group of utilizing their different skill sets and be able, well, this is going to cause a mismatch issue. Like, this guy's great against linebackers. This guy, like Wes, does a great job sneaking through, finding little windows here or there. So that's why you kind of look at it as a whole wide receiver core, and then that way you don't have to focus on, hey, I need to put this guy at this spot to be able to run this play, right? It allows us to kind of mix and match and moves things. It makes it kind of harder on the defense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very impressed with how the passing game looked. And, of course, getting in the end zone through the air, too, impressive from Angel. But the turnovers are something that you got to work on as well. And that's, you know, again, with a younger quarterback, Angel's just a sophomore this year, that's going to come, right? The turnovers, that happens. And against a defense like Gettysburg as well, Centennial Conference foe, those things happen, but those are little mistakes that can be tweaked, that can be worked on in practice. I don't think those things are ultimately going to hurt this team moving forward.
No, and you look at, there's a lot that goes into a turnover, right? Like the first one, he got hit as he was throwing.
Right.
If he doesn't get hit, I think he completes it to the outside guy. We probably get the first down and we're moving the ball. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. And the second one, like when I met with them today, I take as much blame for that as he does, right? I didn't put him in a great position. Yes, he could have made a better choice, but I could have did a few things differently that don't place us in that situation. Yeah. So you kind of put it, like I have to remind myself sometimes that like this was the most playing he's had this year, specifically within within our offense, and he is still a sophomore, right? Like you want to hold your quarterbacks to extremely high standards because that's what you want them to get to, but you have to remind yourself they are still young, they're still learning, they're still doing certain things, especially in like this was game 4 within our offense, right? Now the key is over the course of things you're not making the same mistakes that you used to make as you go forward in the future. That's what I tell the guys all the time is like I'm never going to judge you on your mistakes because no one's perfect, right? We're going to get really hard on you is when you make the same mistake and don't learn from those mistakes.
And even with those mistakes, you were never out of the game at any point. It was still, a 2-possession game at the end, and the defense was phenomenal from start to finish. I was really impressed, too, that they were able to shut down this Gettysburg offense, which has been one of the best in Division III over the first couple of weeks of the season. I mean, they had combined 100 points against Juniata in the season opener. They put up 50 points in their last game before this, and they were held to just 20, and 2 of those touchdowns were defensive touchdowns. So extremely impressive effort from the defense, from the Green Terror, to be able to shut down that offense from start to finish like they did.
Excuse me. Yeah, when we were talking to the defensive guys leading into it, we're like, as we're getting further into the season, the challenges get harder and harder and harder, but you need to rise to those challenges, right? We thought we were going to have a pretty good defense. We returned a lot of guys, a lot of experience, and then started the year, played pretty well. And then week by week, you can start seeing a couple more things click in their minds. They start seeing a few things a little bit faster, and it's, all right, this is what you have to do as you're getting into a really good conference play, especially as you're getting ready for a good Muhlenberg team. Yeah,
exactly. Let's get into that Muhlenberg game now while we have time. Coming up this weekend, it's at home, back on the hill, back at Gill Stadium on October 12th, this Saturday, against Muhlenberg, who is one of the best teams in the Centennial every year. But this year, they're off to a bit of a shaky start. They're only 2-2 on the season this year. But before we talk about Muhlenberg in particular, I want to touch on the theme of this game. This game is the Helinski's Hope game, which is raising awareness for student-athlete mental health. Skylar, can you just kind of explain to me what Helinski's Hope is and how this initiative is meaningful to you personally?
So I started working with Helinski's Hope last year when I was at King's College. Helinski's Hope is a foundation that was founded by the family of Tyler Helinski. He was a former quarterback at Washington State who unfortunately died by suicide. And his family wanted to find a way to honor him and really help raise the awareness, specifically with mental health issues that stem with student athletes who are put under a lot of pressure, whose identity is really torn from how much do I place into athletics compared to academics. And it is a tough thing, especially when you've been an athlete yourself. Going through it, you can really sense and understand it. So the family started the foundation, and Helinski's Hope every year that during Student Athlete Mental Health Awareness Week, the football game, if you go to the Helinski's Hope and you fill and sign up, they'll actually send you a full basket, all free. You don't have to give any money. It's all done by donations to the organization. Oh, wow. And we're going to be able to have helmet stickers on all of our helmets that have the green ribbon for mental health awareness. We were able to pass out ribbons to other sports teams. Every coach within the athletic department now has a pin lapel to wear for the game. And it's just overarching, letting all the student athletes know that it's okay to not be okay. Right? There are resources available to them that just because you're an athlete doesn't mean anything different than being anyone else, right? We all have bad days. We all have bad times. And it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay really to seek it. And this is one that matters a lot to me. I've had family members that have involved and have some mental health issues and things in the past. And it's something, again, I was a psychology major. My dream when I was a kid, when I was going through college, was to be some sort of high school counselor and help especially young students and young athletes specifically. So this is something that matters a lot to me, and I'm very, very excited to bring this to McDaniel this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a tremendous cause, and something that certainly is getting a lot more attention, I think, in recent years. The conversation about mental health, not just for student athletes, but for all college students on campus, has really begun to develop a little more, and it's become a little more open and more accepting, and that's great to see. And I remember that story when it first happened, when Tyler Helinski lost his life, just a terrible tragedy, and the fact that something this positive can come out of that is really great. And it's great to see that the dialogue is changing and that more people are more open and more comfortable discussing these things, because as you mentioned, it affects all of us. It doesn't just affect one person or small, like it affects everybody, and especially student athletes. It's a tough life, when you got to go to class and you've got to practice, and you're worrying about whether you're going to start or how much you're going to play, or all these other things can kind of add on to the pressure of being a student athlete. And I think this weekend is a really great chance to bring more awareness to this cause and to bring more open conversation about student athlete mental health. It's all great to me.
Yeah, for the longest time, everyone always kept everything in, and that was the machoism of sports and things like that. And the goal is to never have to tell a story like this again. Yeah. That's really the ultimate goal, is for everyone to find help that needs help and make sure it's okay to talk about these things, right? And you're really trying to break that stigma, so I'm really excited to bring that this weekend. Yeah,
absolutely. Really great that you guys are involved in this initiative now. And now we can switch gears a little bit and talk about this Muhlenberg team in particular. They're 2-2 on the year, coming off of a 10-1 season last season in 2023. Top 2 finisher in the conference, right next to Johns Hopkins in the Centennial standings. But off to a slow start this year, just 2-2 through their first 4 games of the year. They beat Moravian in their season opener, but lost a barn burner at Salisbury in the next week, 59-38, final score there. And then the last 2 games really they've played have also been super high scoring. I mean, you look at this game against the College of New Jersey that they won 55-52, and then this past weekend losing against Ursinus, who's undefeated right now, top of the conference, 53-50. So we're talking about an offense that is putting up points like nobody's business, and then a defense that has been gashed for some big plays as well.
When you look at the start of their year, they're playing really, really good teams. So Salisbury's nationally ranked, because Salisbury, after they won that game, ended up then just beating Hopkins. Yeah, right. And then you're talking about Ursinus, who is undefeated, who just, I believe, received national votes in the top 25
Yep.
because people are recognizing how well they're playing. And you look at Muhlenberg, I believe they're the #1 offense in the entire country right now.
Yeah.
They're playing really, really good football on that side, but they're kind of been forced to. The defense has kind of let them go. But you look at each one of those opponents they played are quality opponents to start the season.
Yeah.
And this is what I was talking about the previous week of really good teams test themselves as they're getting into the gauntlet of the conference play. I know Coach Millen, their head coach, very, very well. He's a very close friend of mine. I worked with him years ago at Susquehanna, and I know no matter what, he's going to have his guys ready to play. They're going to be ready to go. So, they could be 0-4. And it wouldn't make any difference because you know the quality of the program, you know the quality of the players because they've been at or near the top the last, 6 years, 7 years?
Yep.
They've really, really been going ever since they had the long run going into the semifinals 2019, I believe, around that time. They've really had things cranked up and going. So you know the quality of the opponent you're going to play.
Yeah, exactly. And again, they've certainly tested themselves this year because you mentioned that Salisbury game, one of the best teams in the country now who also just beat Hopkins. But let's talk a little bit about what your plan is for this weekend moving forward. You know, obviously we don't want to give too much away to get things going here, and you're still just trying to figure out the game plan. But this team can put a ton of points on the board. We've seen that in their first 4 weeks of the season. But your defense has shown the ability to shut down a high-scoring offense with, great efficiency. So defensively, what are you looking to do to slow down this Mule offense?
I mean, first they have to step up to the challenge.
Yeah.
Right? They want to feel that they're a high-quality defense. I believe we're some of the high categories in our entire conference statistics. So they want to believe that they're outweighed. Now it's time to show it against one of the best.
Yeah.
So it's really about challenging them and really getting them to step up to the challenge and see how well can they play. Can they start making fewer and fewer mistakes? And can we keep creating some turnovers?
Right.
That's really been the big one is when you're playing a high-quality offense, don't let them have the football.
Yeah.
Right. So it's challenging the guys to create the fumbles, be in the passing lanes, right? Get some sacks, get them behind the sticks. So they have to try to take a couple of chances and try to really get them in some third long situations where it doesn't, I don't care who you are. If it's 3rd and 15, it's hard to get that first down.
Yeah.
So we really want to challenge the guys to really step up and see how well they want to play now that we're getting into the gauntlet of the conference.
How about the offense? What are you expecting to see from the running game, from the passing game? Are we going to see a similar quarterback situation that we saw last week? What's the initial thought for the offense coming into this week?
Well, we want to kind of continue growing in that side. I mean, obviously eliminate the turnovers. If we could get that out of the way, we'll start playing better. But we want to play ahead of the sticks. That's really, you go back and look when we start, again, that's why I mentioned third down. If we're getting to 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, that's really hard for us. That's not where we are right now as a program. Yeah. So we need to really crank things up and be better on first down to give us a chance and understand that it's hard getting to the red zone. When we get there, we have to come away with points. There's not a team that you can go 3 and out on, or next thing you know, you're going to be down 21-0, and you don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is going to be a really entertaining game. I'm definitely excited to see the defensive matchup for the Green Terror going up against the offense of Muhlenberg because, again, this is one of the highest scoring teams in the country, and your defense has been stellar through the first 4 games. So really excited to see that matchup in particular. Excited to see what the offense does as well. If we continue to see Angel Granado at quarterback, we saw a little bit of Jaden Booker as well, the freshman, this past week. So lots of different things that I'm personally looking forward to seeing this week at home on the Hill. McDaniel and Muhlenberg, 2 p.m. right here in Westminster this upcoming Saturday. Skylar, thanks so much for being the guest, as always.
I appreciate it, Avery. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Skylar Fultz, head coach of the McDaniel Green Terror football program, our first guest of the evening. We'll take a break and come back with Pat Stetzer. You're familiar with him on Carroll Media Center. He'll be our guest for segment 2 right here on Sports Talk at the Island Green. Back after this.
Welcome to Island Green, Westminster. The Pub and Grill offers a variety of food in a family-friendly atmosphere. Live music, private suites, miniature golf. Learn more at islandgreenwestminster.com. Island Green, Westminster.
My name is Cooper Sheeler. I'm a senior at Winters Mill, and I'm here interning at the Community Media Center. I recently saw this opportunity because I was playing football over at Winters Mill, and I saw the Community Media Center filming and broadcasting a couple of our games. So I thought that was a really cool way to connect with the community, and I really wanted to be a part of that. Pretty much what I do throughout the day is I help with graphics throughout their game on segments and game of the week. And I also help out prepare stats for all the seasons, the spring and the winter and the fall. I update all of those, and I pretty much go around and I can just help out. I can help out at games when they're preparing for a game of the week. I've done a couple podcasts here at Community Media Center. I would highly recommend people come in here for an internship. It's a lot of fun. The people that work here are really nice, and you get to experience a lot of cool things that you've probably never done before.
Hey there, I'm Pat Stetzer.
And I'm Michael Duffy, inviting you to join us for The Score and more.
Each week we'll talk about high school sports in Carroll County. We'll share information about upcoming games, highlight coaches and athletes, and much more.
We'll even try to have a little fun along the way. Don't miss The Score and More podcast, presented by CM Sportsnet.
The Score and More Sports podcast is available online at carrollmediacenter.org and on a variety of podcast channels.
Brought to you by Farmers and Merchants Bank.
Welcome back to segment 2 for our episode of Sports Talk at the Island Green, right here in the Island Green in Westminster, Maryland. Avery Newport back with you once again with Pat Stetzer, the sports editor for Carroll Media Center. And you're a pretty familiar face here, Pat. Thanks so much for coming on our show here today.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a great thing. Come on.
Thanks for having me, Avery. I appreciate it, man. Always good to be here.
Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit of high school football here in the area in Carroll County, which is your specialty, of course. We'll recap the games from last week, and we'll go ahead and preview the games coming up this weekend. We'll talk first about Westminster at Manchester Valley, one of the games of the weekend. 20-13, the final score for Westminster. The Owls getting the win on the road over Man Valley. Just give me quickly your thoughts on that game.
Yeah, so it was our CM Sportsnet game of the week last Friday at Manchester Valley, and you know the first half went the Mavericks' way, and the second half the Owls made the adjustments in the second half, and Man Valley couldn't quite keep pace. It was I wouldn't say a total surprise that Man Valley was up by 2 scores, but the 13-0 lead felt really good, and then Westminster scored quick. They scored in big chunks, and Man Valley couldn't quite keep up. Jack Hitchcock, one of the junior running backs for Westminster, had over 140 yards rushing and caught a 49-yard touchdown on a nice wheel route to kind of get them back on top. And then the defense played well and held Man Valley down. It was an eerie feeling. We were watching the game and the mist was coming in on the other side of the field. Wow. So it made for a nice atmosphere. But that's Westminster's 3rd win in a row after 2 losses in the first 2 weeks against a really good Franklin team and a really good Frederick team.
Right. They've
now beaten South Carroll, Walkersville, and Man Valley. So 2-0 in the county and 3-2 overall. So a good win for the Owls. And when Man Valley had been shut out the week before, so getting some points on the board was a step in the right direction for Man Valley. But again, 1-4 now overall, and trying to get some consistency, I think, was the Mavericks' main goal right now.
Yeah, exactly. We'll switch gears here and talk South Carroll. We've had them come on the show recently as well. They lost on the road at Brunswick. That's a non-county game, 21-7.
Yeah.
Final score there. What were your thoughts from seeing that score?
Yeah, the offense has been hard to come by for South Carroll. They had 1 touchdown run from Manny Rodriguez, one of their talented runners, but the offense, after the 13-0 win last week against Man Valley, or the week before, I should say, they sort of went backward after a couple games where they couldn't get their offense going. So it's been a little bit of a slow go. I guess I'm most surprised quarterback Caleb Evans, who was returned last year after having a 1,000-yard passing season, has yet to throw a touchdown through the first 5 weeks. A little surprising there. But they've been running the ball very well. The Rodriguez brothers and others. South Carolina did lose one of their top receivers to injury a few weeks ago, so obviously that's a setback there. But they're going to be in almost every game. Take the Linganore game away, and it's 7-0, 20-6. They win 13-0. They lose by 2 touchdowns. They're not getting blown off the field.
Sure.
So they're in the game. I think if you're Coach Mike Crumley and South Carolina, you hope that offense can take a step in the second half of the regular season.
Right. I mean, the defense for South Carolina has been phenomenal through the first 4 weeks, as you mentioned. Just the offense needs to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, as that's certainly something that comes along for the rest of the season. I mean, the defense is already there, but the offense might take a little bit of time to pick up for the Cavs. But we'll switch gears here and talk a little Century at Francis Scott Key. Another low-scoring defensive battle in that one. FSK getting the win at home, 12-7 over Century.
You wondered, too, a little bit. You're talking about the scores, and they were all sort of down. And this was a week where we had a ton of rain, a ton of weather.
Right.
Fields were in pretty good shape, but that could have limited the offenses a little bit here and there. But that game was, I believe, 7-6 late. Century had the lead, and FSK was pinned deep in its own end of the field. And Jacob Etzer, the sophomore quarterback, hits a senior transfer receiver, Bryson Lookingbill. He goes 90 yards on a slant pass and scores the touchdown. They missed the extra point, so they're only up by, 5, and they have to hold Century off down the stretch. You mentioned defense. To that point, FSK has only allowed 55 points this year through 5 games. So it's an impressive defense, and they had lost the week before to Liberty, didn't score 21-0. They were 3-0, feeling good about themselves, and rightfully so. Maybe a little bit of a step back, but a little humbling, so to speak, and then they come out and get a win against a up-and-coming Century team. So pretty good. You mentioned low scoring and a gutty win, but when they had to have that long play, they got it from Lookingbill, who's one of the fastest guys in the county. So a good win for them at home, and then that gets them to 4-1 overall and 2-1 in the county. Yeah,
well, we got to see a little bit of Century at our field in McDaniel a couple weeks ago,
right,
because the field was flooded from the weather conditions a couple weeks ago from the hurricane, and so we got to see them play at Gill Stadium against Winters Mill. That was a high-scoring offensive battle, and then you switch gears a week later, and now they're in a tight defensive game from start to finish. And
and the week before that, they scored 55 against Smithsburg.
Right.
So Century's scoring points, and it's funny numbers. Different teams from last year, this year. I believe they scored 56 points all of last year, and so they've already made strides on their offense. Sure. But they were kind of stuck in neutral last week against a really good FSK defense.
Exactly. Well, we'll wrap up here and talk a little bit more about this Winters Mill team that we saw a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
They lost on the road at Liberty, 35-6. Final score there. Yeah. Kind of a surprising outcome to me. But what are your thoughts?
A little bit. It was a closer game. If you watched it, we had coverage of that game as well. We had a camera crew at there, and it was a closer game, lower score game in the first half. Winters Mill started to pull away. When Liberty started to pull away. Liberty had its way throwing the ball. Chase Miller, their quarterback, who was also back from last year after a 1,000-yard season. Sure. 4 touchdown passes. 2 of them went to their big receiver, Tristan West. He had 6 catches for 124 yards, I think, and 2 touchdowns. He's a mismatch.
Yeah.
He's their big 6-foot-plus guy who's athletic and pretty quick and can go up and get the ball. So they went to their strength, and it worked for them. And, Liberty, again, 0-2 after losing to Walkersville and Boonesboro. Excuse me, win against Man Valley, held on to win after a big lead. Blank FSK, and then run over Winters Mill. And they get a West Virginia opponent this week in Hedgesville and looking to go 4-2. So stringing wins together right now is going to bode well for you down the stretch, and that's what Liberty's been doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to mention Hedgesville because I used to work in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia, so I'm very familiar with Hedgesville and Martinsburg and Washington, Jefferson, all those schools down there. So very familiar with the EPAC schools. But Hedgesville on the road at Liberty this weekend at 6:30. So give me a little bit of your analysis early on, what you're expecting to see from Hedgesville and Liberty in that game.
Yeah, not knowing too much about Hedgesville. I know Liberty beat them last year. I just know that, Liberty wants to score quick and get up. The last 3 weeks, they put up 80-some points in those 3 games. They're up to 112 points through the first 5 games of the season. And it seemed, again, they were the ones that were a little bit stuck in neutral the first couple games, albeit against a really good Walkersville team and a really good Boonesboro team. So getting those wins, getting that confidence and the connection of Chase Miller to his receivers. I mentioned Tristan West. David Akinboye is another fast receiver they have. Kevin Poole's a talented running back. They've got pieces on defense. I thought they might be the team to contend with the reigning county champion Westminster, so to speak, during the season. They got a game against each other in a couple weeks. Obviously, that's a few weeks down the road. I would just think that knowing that they got Hedgesville last year and a victory against them helps them this year with that confidence level. You might know more about Hedgesville than I do, but I know they come a little bit of a trip out here to Carroll County. So, if it's Liberty, it's a home game. It's their third in a row. I think they have 4. They have one again next week, too. So, it's a nice to get those home games and get the crowd out. There was homecoming last week against Winters Mill, so a nice homecoming win for the Lions. And Coach Larry Luth and his staff and his veterans just want to keep stringing wins together.
Yeah, exactly. We talked to Coach Luth a couple weeks ago here as well, and he mentioned the passing game as they wanted to try and keep developing the passing game, and it's been stellar for the last couple of weeks. I mean, Tristan West was just an absolute machine in the passing game, had a couple big touchdowns over the last few weeks, so certainly a name to keep an eye on this week for the Lions.
Yeah, the Hedgesville's going to have to watch for him. He's got 4 in the last 2 weeks. I think he has six for the season. So, he's. We talked to him actually earlier today. I went out to practice just to chat with him. He's going to be our athlete of the week for this week. And, it was nice to hear him, talk about how he's been really, that rapport with him and Chase Miller has really been paying dividends on the field.
Sure, certainly has. Well, really interested to see how that one turns out because, again, Hedgesville is a West Virginia team. Not familiar with playing teams all the way out here in Carroll County all the time. So definitely interesting to see if that travel plays an impact on how this game works out. But excited to keep an eye on that Hedgesville Liberty game this weekend. We'll talk a little bit about Winters Mill at South Carroll here this weekend. Also at 6:30 on Thursday the 10th. Let's talk a little bit about both Winters Mill and South Carroll. Of course, losing. Both these teams lost this past weekend, so both are trying to get back off the schneid this week. What are you expecting to see from South Carroll as the host this week?
Yeah, one of these teams is going to have to score some points. They're the ones that have been sort of behind the pack in terms of the offense. And for Winters Mill, you said off the schneid, they haven't got a win yet this year. They're winless. Such a different time, right? Last year, 9-2, the best season they ever had, their first playoff win ever. A lot of those guys graduate. Who's going to be able to fill those roles? I know Coach Matt Miller liked some of the guys that were coming in to replace some of those roles, but it takes a little bit of time, right? It's a whole new look on offense with a new quarterback and new receivers and new running backs for that matter. Some of their linemen did return, but again, they're close. They were close a couple times. They went out to Seaford, Delaware, which is the furthest they had to go for a game a couple weeks ago. Seaford was a team that was struggling, hadn't won a lot of games in the last couple seasons. I think Winters Mill had a field goal block to lose 12-10, and obviously Seaford celebrates a much-needed win. So it's those kind of games, right? They're in the game against Liberty until the second half, and Liberty kind of pulls away. They've been – Century game was sort of back and forth until Century pulled away. The game was at McDaniel. And I think if you're South Carroll – and again, they lost this. I'm sorry, back to Winters Mill. They lost to FSK 19-6. So Century did pull away from them, and so did Liberty. But they've been in a couple of these games, 12-10, 19-6.
Sure.
If you're Matt Miller and the Falcons, you got to tell your guys it's coming. We're gonna put a 4-quarter game together. And if you're South Carroll, again, the defense has been pretty good. It's just the offense has been sort of stuck. It still surprises me anyway that they've only haven't thrown a touchdown pass yet. Now, when I say that, they'll go out and throw 4 or 5 of them this week. But
the classic broadcaster's jinx there.
Which the Cavaliers would definitely want to have. But this game went to overtime last year. Winters Mill won. They had gone 9-0 until they lost to 8-0 until they lost to Westminster in the last week of the season. But we had that game last year as one of our games of the week. Great game. South Carroll forced overtime, kicked a 40-yard field goal, hung right with Winters Mill all the way. Now, again, obviously that was last year. Some of those guys are gone, but a lot of South Carroll's guys are back from that team. So I expect it to be a pretty competitive game between the Cavaliers and the Falcons.
I do as well. Again, both teams that are trying to get in the win column after a couple losses this year. I think both teams are really going to try hard to get back into the win column. Let's switch gears here and talk a little bit more about two teams that have also just coming off of losses this week. They're going to face off against each other. Century at Man Valley. We've seen Century be able to put up some points on the offensive end, but coming off of a slow game last week at FSK, losing 12-7. Right. At Man Valley, who's 1-4 this year, still trying to find out where their strengths are so far this season. So what are you expecting to see from those two teams?
Yeah, and 3 losses in a row for Man Valley, which they didn't really have they had the pleasure of not, or the luxury of not having to do that last year. They got it going and got a playoff win. And with Century, they're still riding from the fact that they were winless on the field last year. They got a win about this time a year ago. They had a forfeit win from week 1 of 2023. But other than that, they lost all 10 games they played on the field. So the fact that they've already put a couple wins together, had a couple talented guys back from that team. Sure. Again, I think the parity is there in Carroll County right now. I know Westminster and Liberty are undefeated in the county, but they've had some they've had some other teams give them their best shot.
Sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if this game was also a little bit more low scoring and a little bit more competitive with the two good defenses.
Yeah, exactly. We'll wrap up here with our high school sports coverage, talking about maybe the game of the week upcoming in the county. I'm sure you would agree. Westminster hosting Francis Scott Key at 7 p.m. on Thursday. Westminster, again, looking like the power in the conference, but Francis Scott Key off to a good start as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's our game of the week. We'll be there on Thursday, 6:45 pregame, and then 7 o'clock kickoff at Ruby Field. And yeah, 4-1 Westminster against 3-2. I'm sorry, 4-1 FSK against 3-2 Westminster, but 2-0 in the county for the Owls after those wins over South Carroll and Man Valley. They've played close games this year too. Again, they lost by 10 to Franklin. They lost by a one possession to Frederick, and then they have the wins and overtime win against Walkersville. Been talking with a coworker of mine and just trying to figure out when the last time we could remember a 0-0 scoreless tie in regulation go to overtime. Wow. Not too many times it happened, but it happened 2 weeks ago against Walkersville, and Westminster won. And then this past week, we had the game. I know Key wants to get that win badly. They went to overtime with Westminster a couple years back when they were really good, had the best record they had to that point in a long time. Westminster won that game a couple years back. But, Key has been, I think the Liberty game motivated Key a little bit more than they were going to let on, that they realized, hey, we were 3-0, we're off to a great start. Maybe we're not quite as good as our record in Painesville, things to work on. And so no better chance this week at a great barometer at home against a really good Westminster team.
Yeah, exactly. A 0-0 tie.
0-0 tie.
That's pretty remarkable. I can remember a college football game from 2014 between Wake Forest and Virginia Tech that went into overtime as a 0-0 tie. That's the only game that sticks out in my mind. So that's funny that you mentioned.
I went back and found a couple in the data banks. There was a 3-0 game about 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago now. I'm too old to remember it, but we've covered some games when I was at the newspaper for a long time. And offenses were work in progress a lot of those years, but these days you don't really tend not to see a 0-0 game. But again, that was the Friday of the bad weather week.
Sure.
Both teams, Walkersville scores a ton of points and they were held scoreless, and Westminster scored points too, and they only got 7 in overtime. So I don't think we'll see that this week between Westminster and FSK, but we're looking forward to a good game on our game of the week.
You never know. Hey, anything can happen. High school football, week in, week out. Anyway, well, Pat, thank you so much for coming on and recapping this past week of games and previewing this upcoming week. A lot of good games on the schedule, a lot of chances for some teams to get some wins this year. A great matchup between FSK and Westminster. Really excited to see how that one turns out.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to believe we're almost into mid-October, and the regular season is winding down, and the playoffs are right around the corner. And looking forward to some fun, exciting high school sports over the next month.
Yeah, exactly. Pat Stetzer, thank you so much for joining us on our show today. We'll make sure and tune into the game of the week this weekend as well. And
please do.
Keep tabs on the rest of the Carroll County high school sports season. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Avery.
Pat Stetzer, our guest, the sports editor for Carroll Media Center. On segment 2, we'll take a break and come back for some Orioles talk, some Ravens talk, some Terps talk. Maryland Sports at Large is next. Sports Talk at the Island Green is back after this.
Welcome to Island Green, Westminster. The Pub and Grill offers a variety of food in a family-friendly atmosphere. Live music, private suites, miniature golf. Learn more at islandgreenwestminster.com. Island Green, Westminster.
My name is Cooper Sheeler. I'm a senior at Winters Mill, and I'm here interning at the Community Media Center. I recently saw this opportunity because I was playing football over at Winters Mill, and I saw the Community Media Center filming and broadcasting a couple of our games. So I thought that was a really cool way to connect with the community, and I really wanted to be a part of that. Pretty much what I do throughout the day is I help with graphics throughout their game on segments and game of the week, and I also help out prepare stats for all the seasons, the spring and the winter and the fall. I update all those, and I pretty much go around and I can just help out. I can help out at games when they're preparing for a game of the week. I've done a couple podcasts here at Community Media Center. I would highly recommend people come in here for an internship. It's a lot of fun. The people that work here are really nice, and you get to experience a lot of cool things that you've probably never done before.
Hey there, I'm Pat Stetzer.
And I'm Michael Duffy, inviting you to join us for The Score and more.
Each week we'll talk about high school sports in Carroll County. We'll share information about upcoming games, highlight coaches and athletes, and much more.
We'll even try to have a little fun along the way. Don't miss The Score and More podcast presented by CM Sportsnet.
The Score and More Sports podcast is available online at carrollmediacenter.org and on a variety of podcast channels.
Brought to you by Farmers and Merchants Bank.
Final segment today, recapping a little Ravens and a little Orioles as well. We'll start with the Ravens coming off of a really impressive win, I think, on the road against the Cincinnati Bengals, an AFC North division opponent, 41-38, the final score. The Ravens getting the win on the road in Cincinnati in overtime on a Justin Tucker game-winning field goal. The offense was tremendous from start to finish. Lamar Jackson had his best passing game of the season and one of the best of his career. Over 350 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air, 33 fantasy points for my fantasy team as well. Thank you, Lamar, for the big win. Great offensive performance from start to finish. Derrick Henry had another stellar game on the ground, 92 yards and a touchdown. Of course, he had that long run in overtime that set up the game-winning kick from Justin Tucker to win the game in Cincinnati. So the offense has looked tremendous. Really, really happy with their performance this past weekend. But the defense still has a lot of question marks. I mean, you got to start with the lack of a pass rush, the big plays over the middle. I mean, Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, Jamar Chase especially, just teeing off on the secondary from start to finish. Burrow had 300 yards, 5 touchdowns through the air, almost 400 passing yards for Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase had 10 catches, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns in the air for him. T. Higgins had 2 touchdown catches as well on another efficient day. So the Bengals receivers, the passing game was brilliant from start to finish. Chase Brown had a great game as the running back for the Bengals, catching passes out of the backfield, making noise on the ground as well. So the Ravens' defense certainly leaves a lot to be desired. And again, this is a Cincinnati team that's off to a slow start this year. Their defense isn't that great either. But we know that the offense for the Bengals is among the best in football. When everybody's healthy and when everyone's playing at full strength, I mean, we've seen this from Joe Burrow and the Bengals before. We've seen Jamar Chase have a breakout season as one of the best rookie wide receivers of all time. We saw the Bengals beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game a few years ago and make the Super Bowl, come within a few plays of beating the Rams in that game. We've seen a lot of potential from the Bengals over the years to get over the hump and make a difference in the AFC North. And the fact that the Ravens were able to overcome a lot of those defensive shortcomings, so there's a lot of good signs to me from an offensive standpoint that the Ravens can hang tough with a team from start to finish and make those plays in overtime to win. But the defense just can't get burned like that week in and week out. I mean, we've seen the Cowboys run roughshod over the Ravens a couple weeks ago in Dallas. We saw the Raiders at home in week 2 in the home opener for Baltimore have a great game on the road and win that game in Baltimore. Season opener, of course, against the Chiefs. You know, the Ravens defense got burned. The secondary got burned with a couple of big plays through the air, which, of course, you're going to get with Patrick Mahomes. But the secondary has really shown a lot of weakness this year, and that's going to be something that needs to be addressed moving forward, especially looking for this weekend's game against the Commanders in Baltimore. That's a 1 o'clock game, but that feels like a primetime matchup because the Ravens have won 3 straight. The Commanders are a surprising 4-1. They just came off of a dominant home win against the Cleveland Browns last week, 34-13 the final. Jaden Daniels looked terrific again after an early interception. He rallied and got the team behind him, and the offense picked it up. Terry McLaurin had a good game through the air, 4 catches, 112 yards for him. So the Commanders look like the best team in the NFC East right now. I got to apologize to Brandon, our producer, who's a Cowboys fan. I don't think he's going to be too happy with me saying that. But with the Commanders at 4-1, they look like a world beater right now, and one of the best teams in the NFC with a rookie quarterback. So the Ravens certainly defensively have to hone in on Daniels and his ability to stretch the field both with his legs and in the air. Of course, he's such a dynamic threat. The Heisman Trophy winner from last year at LSU. So really interested to see how the Ravens will combat that offense for the Commanders because Washington has been a huge surprise this year. I think a lot of people thought that Jaden Daniels was going to be, a top-tier quarterback right away, but he's outperformed every other rookie quarterback in the field, even Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick. I mean, Jaden Daniels is well on his way to being Offensive Rookie of the Year, having a C.J. Stroud type of rise this year as a rookie quarterback. So very impressed with Daniels for the first couple of weeks of the season, and hope he doesn't do it against the Ravens this weekend. But that'll do it for our Ravens talk. We'll touch a little bit here about the Orioles, and then we'll wrap it up for this segment and this evening. The Orioles, of course, no longer in the playoffs. They got swept out of the wild card round last week by the Kansas City Royals, the 5th seed in the American League, losing 1-0 in Game 1 at home at Camden Yards, and then losing 2-1 in Game 2 to lose the series. Disappointing end to the season for the O's. Of course, we saw a team that definitely took a step down this year, from where they were a year ago, winning 101 games in the American League East Crown. This year's team was not nearly as good as last year's team was, but you saw a great start to the year before the All-Star break. Post All-Star break, the injuries began to pile up. The pitching staff began to get hurt. They started the year with 3 arms, getting Tommy John surgery. So really not ideal circumstances coming into the season for the Orioles to capitalize on the success they had last year. And you saw a lot of the struggles that they had for the rest of the second half of the season after the All-Star break really encapsulate themselves in this wild card series against the Royals. The offense just failed to show up in both games. We only had 1 run put up on the board by the Orioles, and that was a solo home run by Cedric Mullins in Game 2. They got shut out at home in Game 1. And you saw some good pitching performances in those 2 games. Zach Eflin pitched well in Game 2. Corbin Burns had one of the best starts for an Oriole pitcher in a playoff game in decades. I mean, it's been such a long time since we've seen such a dominant performance on the mound from an Orioles pitcher. But it was wasted because of no run support. So really tough to see the offense continue their slide in the second half in those first 2 wild card games. Especially disappointing given that the offense was mostly healthy coming into this series. I mean, a lot of those bats returned to the lineup for this postseason series, and they just disappeared at the worst possible time. So very unfortunate for the Orioles season to end the way it did. We'll give you a little bit of a recap of what's going on in the rest of the Major League Baseball playoffs. As it stands right now, the Tigers and Guardians playing in Game 2 of their series in the American League Division Series, with the Tigers up 3-0 last I checked in the 9th, and Detroit, I believe, won that game. So the Tigers tying up that series in Cleveland, 1 game apiece. Really interesting to see the Tigers and their resurgence this year. I remember a couple weeks ago in August even, they had a minute chance to make the playoffs, less than 1%. And here they are tying up the division series 1-1 against the Cleveland Guardians. Really impressive to see how they've completely turned their season around out of nowhere. I mean, they were sellers at the trade deadline. They traded one of their best starting pitchers, Jack Flaherty, to the Dodgers, and they got better after getting rid of some of their starters. Just a really rare combination of circumstances that came together for the Tigers. And you got to love a team that's young, that's hungry, that has one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. No real star players beyond Tarek Skubal, the starting pitcher for the Tigers, have just a tremendous run like this. And I hope that they continue their late season run, because it's really fun to see a team come out of nowhere like that and have a run like they've had. So the Tigers and Guardians series, that's all knotted up at 1 game apiece after Detroit wins on the road against Cleveland today. Coming up later this evening, the Royals and the Yankees will battle in Game 2 of that series in the ALDS, with the Yankees leading 1-0 in that series. We've seen some impressive performances from the Royals this season, but they've also had a bit of a second-half slide coming into the playoffs. They almost lost their wild card position to the Tigers. They were able to win a couple games at the end of the year to maintain their spot in the postseason. But the Royals have been pretty cold as well, and they only benefited from an Orioles team that was even colder than they were to be able to get to this point in the playoffs. The Orioles just have a boogeyman, I guess, with Kansas City, because I remember when they got swept by the Royals in the 2014 American League Championship Series. I maintain to this day that Oriole team should have won that series. They were the better team on paper, just couldn't get it done. They were the higher-seeded team as well. And then this year, too, losing in the wild card series to Kansas City. So the the Royals definitely have some moments. They have Bobby Witt Jr., who is almost certainly going to be the American League MVP runner-up this year behind Aaron Judge. Just a phenomenal talent at the shortstop spot. Great offense, great defense from Witt. We've seen a lot of potential from him, and he's only capitalized on that potential this year. But the Yankees are just stacked from top to bottom. That lineup is loaded, as always. Aaron Judge, Juan Soto in the lineup this year, providing a lot of power. Just tough to beat that lineup night in and night out. But we've seen some good performances from the Kansas City pitching staff as well. Cole Reagans had a great start against the Orioles in the wild card round, and then Seth Lugo, who won 16 games in the regular season, came out of nowhere to have a Cy Young type year. I don't think he's going to win the Cy Young. I think Tarek Skubal is probably going to win that for Detroit, but he'll probably finish second, if not third, in the Cy Young voting. So a lot of talent in that Kansas City pitching staff, but it was the bullpen that lost them that game one in the Bronx. So we'll see how the Royals respond to the hostile crowd in New York. That's never an easy atmosphere to play in the Bronx, especially in the playoffs at Yankee Stadium. So we'll keep an eye on that game too, coming up here in just a couple. It's coming up later this evening. I'm blanking on the time right now, but 7:30. Thank you, Brandon. That's the time for Game 2 of Royals-Yankees in the ALDS. The Padres getting the win on the road against the Dodgers last night in L.A. 10-2 was the final score there. Definitely tensions were pretty high in that game. Of course, the Pods and Dodgers have a big rivalry, and 6 home runs hit by San Diego tied their playoff record for the franchise history for most home runs hit in a postseason game. Dodger fans were throwing things on the field. The game was delayed for a lengthy bit of time as the umps tried to get things under control in Dodger Stadium. So tensions are high, and that's why you love the playoffs, right? Because this is a rivalry. These two teams don't like each other. They've met in the playoffs 3 times in the last 4 years, I believe. They met in 2020, 2022 in the division series, and they're meeting again here in 2024. So they've had a great rivalry in the last couple of years. Ever since the Padres became a winning franchise, they've been in the playoffs. Really love to see those playoff rivalries continue to heat up. And same thing with the Phillies and the Mets, the other series in the National League. That series was tied up at 1 game apiece yesterday when Nick Castellanos hit a walk-off single in the bottom of the 9th for the Phillies to win that one 7-6 at home against the Mets. That was a back-and-forth contest. Really fun to watch that one go down, and always love a walk-off finish, right? So both those series will now switch on the road. San Diego will host Game 3, and the Mets will host Game 3 from Citi Field coming up tomorrow evening. So that'll wrap up our little playoff coverage for Major League Baseball and wrap up our Orioles talk and Ravens talk as well. No more Orioles games because they got swept. They're not in the playoffs anymore. But the Ravens and Commanders will square off in Baltimore this weekend, 1 o'clock on Sunday. That should be one of the games of the week in the NFL. Really excited to see if this Commanders team is for real and if the Ravens can figure out some of their defensive problems and if the offense can keep up their hot streak that they've been on for the last couple of weeks. That's going to do it for our episode today of Sports Talk at the Island Green. Thanks so much to Skylar Fultz, as always, bringing his expertise on to talk about McDaniel College Green Terror football. McDaniel plays Muhlenberg at home this weekend in Westminster on Saturday at 2 p.m. Special thanks to Pat Stetzer as well for Carroll Media Center, providing some insight into the high school scene in Carroll County. Always great to talk to him. And game of the week this week, Westminster hosting Francis Scott Key. You can watch that at 7 p.m. Pre-game coverage begins at 6:45 on Carroll Media Center. That's going to do it for us here from the Island Green. I'm Avery Newport. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. We'll be right back here, same time, same place, next week on Monday. Enjoy the rest of your evening.